I read an interesting article this summer on the astronauts and their spiritual experiences of having gone into the universe outside of the Earth plane and looking back. And one of the astronauts was quoted as saying that when he looked back at the Earth, this blue planet, like what our sky is what you see from out there, and you look then in one direction, you see Earth and this tiny little dot, this blue dot, and then you look out the other way and you see an infinite number of worlds, and you look all around you and you're surrounded by this infinity of this universe. He said, I realized that there's an intelligence to this system, that it is an intelligent system that is all absolutely, and he's like, it happened for him in a moment, this instantaneous kind of realization that there's an intelligence to all of this, that the intelligence that is a part of the universe, or that allows the universe to work. Again, the label isn't important. He said it made him realize that it's all working absolutely perfectly and that it's all on purpose, and that all of it has a purpose. Well, I have discovered that most people really don't believe they have a purpose, or they spend a big hunk of their life trying to discover their purpose, or they will find so many events transpiring in their life that seem to be inconsistent with any kind of grander purpose that it's impossible for them to accept that this is anything but just one grand accident. I know it's not an accident. And once you discover your purpose, and the way that you discover that, that's that secret source. So that's the secret force, if you will, that is within you at all times. This invisible, silent, empty space that is a part of every one of us. That is what allows us to be. My own development is probably just as appropriate to talk about here as anything on these tapes, because I often think to myself that if I can do it, coming from where I came from, that anybody can. I come from impoverished beginnings, a child who never had an allowance in his life, didn't even know what it was. When other kids would talk about my allowance, I didn't know anything about that, because there just wasn't anybody there to give me an allowance. The people that were there didn't have it to give away anyway. So it was very, very early in my own development that I learned the secrets of being my own person and my own strengths. That internal kind of knowingness isn't something I believe that I learned somewhere along the line through some magical, instantaneous kind of revelation. It was something that I believe I showed up with here, and that I think that every single person has that capacity for, but they don't seem to choose it. And it's like knowing that you have that inner strength, and knowing that nobody else can make you unhappy, and knowing that no circumstance out there is too big for you to handle, and knowing that when you go off to sleep at night, no matter what has happened all day long, that you still only have yourself to live with, and that very private inner world wherein you talk to yourself, and we call this self-talk or whatever you want to call it. All of us do this all the time. We have these conversations with ourselves, which is really two people. We are having a conversation with ourselves, and we do this all the time. And what the quality of those conversations are, how you process the daily events of your life and all of the things that are happening to you, is really the secret source of enormous strength. And then, as you get a little older, you begin to put a label on that. You begin to identify that in some way as something that is more than just an intuitive way of processing the world in a positive direction. It's more than that. You begin to realize that you're not alone. And a lot of people believe that they are alone in the world, and that this inner world of thought, this inner world of power and of inner conviction, or whatever you want to call it, is something that you can rely on, but it's not just something that you're alone with. And as I got older and more experienced in it, I began to see that I believe I have someone with me, or guides with me, or some kind of help available to me at all times. And it's just really a question of whether you decide to believe it or don't believe it. It isn't anything we can put to a double-blind study and have scientists come up and say, no, this doesn't exist or that doesn't exist. It's just a knowing. And when you have that guide, and almost all of the great spiritual masters and the great religions and so on, when you begin to study them, as I have done in more recent years in my life and written books about them and produced tapes about them, you begin to discover that the greatest thinkers, the great contributors, all have this sort of inner knowing that they're not alone, that help is available to you. Help in the form of whatever you want to call it isn't even relevant. If you want to call it God, or you want to call it Buddha, or you want to call it Christ, or you want to call it spirituality or consciousness or whatever, it isn't the label that's important. It's the experience of it. And it's the knowing that it's there, and knowing that you can go there at any time.